So Prince Edward just pulled off something that honestly nobody saw coming, and the way he did it is almost more interesting than what he actually won. Because for years, Charles had apparently been operating under this assumption, and it's a pretty wild assumption when you think about it, that as king, he could basically reorganize the family assets however he wanted. He thought he had the final say over royal property, royal titles, and anything connected to them. And on March 25th, 2026, he found out in writing that he absolutely does not. What makes this whole situation so fascinating is that Edward didn't just win a fight. He exposed a fundamental misunderstanding at the top of the monarchy about what a king can and cannot do. And he did it by being the one person in the family who apparently kept every single receipt. So here's where it starts. Queen Elizabeth II, before she died in September 2022, made a series of decisions that were extremely deliberate. She had watched the family change. She had watched pressure build around money and titles and control, and she knew exactly what she wanted locked in before she was gone. The Dukedom of Edinburgh was going to Prince Edward. That was not up for debate. That title had defined Prince Philip for more than 70 years. It was his entire life's role, and Elizabeth made sure it would pass to the one son who stayed steady, stayed out of scandal, and never brought harm to the monarchy. That promise was fulfilled in April 2023 when King Charles III officially handed Edward the title. And if the story stopped there, everything would be fine. But it doesn't stop there because the title was only half of what Edward inherited. The other half was Bagshot Park. And this is where the whole thing gets complicated in a way that actually matters. Bagshot Park is not just a house. It's a 120-room Tudor Gothic mansion sitting on 51 acres inside Windsor Great Park. It's the seat of the dukedom. And in her final years, Elizabeth signed a letter of intent that tied that estate directly to the Edinburgh title. That letter was witnessed by Prince Philip as he was dying. He knew exactly why it mattered. He knew that without it, Edward could lose everything tied to that title. So Elizabeth locked it in. The title and the estate were meant to stay together. That was her decision, clearly documented with witnesses, but after she was gone, a completely different mindset took over inside the palace. Charles had believed for years, and this is the belief that caused this entire situation, that modernization gave him the right to review everything, to cut cost, to restructure, and if necessary, to take things back. By 2026, that belief had turned into actual action. There were reviews of royal leases, financial audits, pressure being applied behind closed doors to change how members of the family lived, and Bagshot Park became a target. Now here's where it gets genuinely ugly. Edward received the dukedom in 2023 after waiting his entire life for it. He watched his father carry that title for decades. He finally stepped into that role, and within 3 years, the same institution that gave it to him began trying to strip away the home that gave the title meaning. He wasn't just being challenged, he was being weakened, because without Bagshot Park, the dukedom becomes empty. Just a name without a base, just a title without power. And what makes this even worse when you actually look at the details is what Edward took on when he got that estate. Bagshot Park was in terrible condition when it was offered to him. In 1996, when the army chaplains left, the building was worn out, outdated, and had been ignored for years. The Crown Estate didn't even want to keep it as a royal residence. There were serious plans to turn it into a hotel or a conference center. That's how little value it had at the time. Instead, it was handed to Edward under a lease signed in March 1998. The terms were clear: £5,000 a year for 50 years. That low rent came with a heavy burden. He had to fix the place, not slowly, not over time, immediately. And he did it. He put in £1.36 million of his own private money he earned himself before becoming a full-time working royal. The total cost of repairs reached nearly £3 million. The Crown Estate covered part of it, but Edward carried a serious financial load. Once the work was done, his rent was increased to £90,000 a year. The National Audit Office confirmed that as market value. And here's the thing that really stands out when you compare it to how other people in the family operated. His brother Andrew never did that. Andrew lived at Royal Lodge for years without ever paying market rate. The National Audit Office documented it. One brother followed the rules and paid his way, the other did not. And now the institution that allowed that double standard was turning its attention to the brother who had done everything right. Edward went even further in securing his position. In 2007, he paid £5 million through his company Eclipse Nominees Limited to extend the lease to 150 years. That's long-term planning. His agreement gave him the right to sell the lease and keep the profit. He built security, he built control, so when you look at the situation in 2026, that same property is worth around £30 million. If the Crown Estate gets it back, it can be sold or leased for huge profit. So when pressure started building on Edward to give it up, it wasn't just about modernization. The financial motive was sitting right there in plain sight. A £30 million asset, And this is where Prince Philip's role becomes impossible to overlook. He saw this coming. That's why he made sure that letter of intent was witnessed and recorded. Philip had spent over 70 years watching how the monarchy operated behind closed doors. He had watched the institution move quietly and efficiently against people it no longer found useful. He was not going to let that happen to his youngest son. So as he was dying, he put his name on a document designed to make that impossible. He knew that without it, Edward would have no protection when the pressure came. So by the time March 25th, 2026 arrived, Edward was ready. His legal file was built on 3 strong points: the original lease showing his financial investment, the letter signed by Elizabeth and witnessed by Philip tying Bagshot Park to the dukedom for his lifetime, and 20 years of records proving he maintained the estate at a level that saved the monarchy money. But even with all of that, one fact still made this situation dangerous. Charles controls the system. He controls the structure that can make life inside the monarchy extremely difficult without breaking any rules. So even with the evidence laid out, nothing was guaranteed. The fight had just started, and then it got even more personal. Because this wasn't just about property. Earlier in 2026, before the lawyers ever walked in with that dossier, a palace official showed up with a clipboard and a quiet instruction. The visit came from the office of Queen Camilla. It was described as a jewelry audit, a routine review, a national heritage check. That's how it was framed. But what it actually meant was simple. Someone had come to count and question jewelry that Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, had worn as her own for 25 years. And at the center of that audit was one piece, the anthem tiara. This wasn't a random item from a vault. It was made specifically for Sophie's wedding in 1999, commissioned by Queen Elizabeth II herself. It was built using 4 antique elements shaped in a honeysuckle design taken from the private collection of Queen Victoria. For nearly 2 decades, it was the only tiara Sophie ever wore. That detail matters more than people think. Sophie was never given open access to the grand state tiaras the way other senior royals were. That was understood inside the family. It was never said loudly, but it was clear. She was not placed at the center. She stayed in the lower position, and the anthem tiara became her one piece or one crown. Take that away, and she's left with nothing. Camilla's argument came through legal language, but the message behind it was sharp. Because the tiara used gold and stones from Queen Victoria's era, it could be classified as crown property. That meant it should be held in the central royal vault and only issued out for official use. The meaning was clear. Sophie would no longer own the tiara she wore on her wedding day. She would have to ask permission to wear it, and the logic behind it was dangerous, because if that argument holds, it doesn't stop with one tiara. It opens the door to reclaim dozens of personal gifts given by Elizabeth over her 70-year reign. It doesn't stop at Sophie. It reaches across the entire family, and it turns back on Camilla herself. Her own jewelry collection came directly from royal sources. Apply that same rule, and her collection falls into the same trap. Edward's legal team saw that immediately, but this situation carried something even darker behind it. The public had seen this kind of move before. After Princess Diana died, a diamond and emerald necklace given to her by the Queen Mother on her wedding day in 1981 was returned to the royal vault. That should have been the end of it. Instead, Camilla had it taken out, redesigned into a brooch, and wore it publicly. People did not stay quiet. The reaction was immediate and angry. That memory never went away. And now the same pattern was playing out again, reaching into something deeply personal and using the institution to justify it. This time, Edward did not stay quiet. His lawyers responded with a document that shut the argument down at its root. It was a deed of gift signed by Elizabeth in 1999. It stated that the anthem tiara was classified as a private wedding present, not a state loan, not a shared asset, not something held in trust. It belonged to Sophie. Elizabeth had also given Sophie the Royal Victorian Order. That's not a casual honor. It's given personally by the monarch for direct service. So look at the full picture. Elizabeth gave her that honor, gave her a wedding tiara, and then signed a legal document confirming it was hers. That's a queen making a direct statement about who she trusted. Camilla's audit was not just about jewelry. It was an attempt to push against that record. But Edward had gone further than anyone realized. Years earlier in 1999, he had worked with royal jewelers to create a matching set of black and white pearl jewelry for Sophie, a necklace and earrings designed to sit perfectly with the anthem tiara. The materials were funded through the crown, but Edward held the design rights. That detail changed everything. His lawyers argued that the tiara and the pearl set formed a single artistic unit tied to Edward's own design work. You cannot remove the tiara without breaking that unit, and that gives him another layer of legal protection. And behind all of this sat something deeply personal. Sophie wore that tiara on her wedding day. Then in October 2019, at a reception in Buckingham Palace, marking the work of the Queen Elizabeth Diamond Jubilee Trust, she was giving a speech in front of senior royals and guests. In the middle of that speech, She turned toward Queen Elizabeth II and said, "Mama, it was not planned. It slipped out in a room where every word is usually carefully controlled." And it showed exactly how she saw her. The woman who signed that deed was the woman she called her mother, and now another woman was trying to take that away. By the afternoon of March 25th, 2026, the situation reached a breaking point. Edward's legal team delivered a direct warning. If the claim on the tiara was not dropped by the end of the day, they would release private letters written by Elizabeth, letters that clearly stated her wish for Sophie to keep full ownership of her personal jewelry. And according to those close to the situation, those letters did not stop there. They included words about Camilla. That threat was explosive because releasing those letters would do more than defend Sophie. It would drag the past back into the open. Elizabeth's long, cold distance toward Camilla, the years it took before she accepted her, the tension that never fully disappeared. Charles had spent years rebuilding Camilla's image, turning her from a deeply unpopular figure into queen consort. Those letters could destroy that work in a single day. This was no longer about a tiara. It was about control, reputation, legacy. By the evening of March 25th, the anthem tiara still remained in Sophie's possession, exactly as it was given to her. But after the audit and the legal pressure, Edward made his move. He had the tiara secured in a high-security private safe under the direct control of his own security team. No one was going to quietly take it, review it, or reclassify it without a fight. Edward had drawn his line, the legal warnings had been delivered, the palace had been pushed into a corner. But pressure on paper was never going to be enough to finish this. What came next was not legal. It was personal, and it was about to walk through the door in the form of Princess Anne. By the afternoon of March 25th, the fight moved out of offices and into a private room inside Buckingham Palace. And when Princess Anne walked in, everything shifted. There was no small talk, no polite opening, no effort to soften what was about to be said. She went straight to the point. But to understand why that moment carried so much weight, you have to look at what changed in the years before it. Anne and Sophie were not always close. As recently as 2021, it was clear to anyone watching that Anne kept her distance. She's always been like that. She doesn't fake warmth. If she doesn't feel it, she doesn't show it. Then April 2021 happened. Prince Philip died. That loss changed the structure inside the family. Both Anne and Sophie stepped forward to support Queen Elizabeth II in her final year. They began seeing each other almost every day, and over time, that distance between them disappeared. By the time of Elizabeth's funeral in September 2022, the change was visible. As they stood waiting for the coffin, Sophie reached out and placed a quiet hand on Anne's back. It was a small gesture, but it was real. It showed trust. That moment mattered more than people realized, because by March 2026, that quiet connection had turned into something strong, something protective, something ready to act. So when Princess Anne walked into that meeting with King Charles III, she was not there as Edward's sister. She was there to defend what their mother had already decided, and she made that clear immediately. She told Charles that if he allowed this to continue, if he allowed private gifts from their mother to be questioned, reclassified, or taken back, then the word of a monarch would mean nothing. Then she delivered the line that stopped the room. If our mother's signature on a lease or a deed of gift is not worth the paper it's written on today, then your signature will be worth even less tomorrow. Anne was attacking the foundation. A king's authority only works if people trust what he signed. That trust doesn't start with him. It comes from every monarch before him. Break that and everything weakens. She had also already reviewed the Bagshot Park documents herself. She knew exactly what Prince Edward had paid, what he had signed, and what the Crown Estate had accepted. The core of that agreement is simple. Edward holds a long-term legal lease over the property backed by his own financial investment and binding terms that give him full right to live there and control it within that lease. Anne's position was direct. Edward paid for that home. The Crown Estate took his money under those terms. That agreement stands. There's nothing left to argue. Anne didn't treat the tiara and the house as separate disputes. She made it clear they were the same fight. Both were things Queen Elizabeth II had personally given and backed by signed documents, and both were now being challenged using the same argument. Anne made the point directly, if they succeed in taking one, they open the door to take the other. And once that door is open, nothing Elizabeth signed is safe anymore. There was a sad twist to this that had to do with Sophie. Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, lost her mother when she was young. Over the years, Queen Elizabeth II became the closest thing she had to a mother. Anne understood exactly what that meant. She had lost her father in 2021, then her mother in 2022. She knows what it means when those connections are gone, and all that remains are the things they left behind. So when the tiara and the home were targeted, Anne didn't see paperwork. She saw something being taken from someone who had already lost enough. And there was another layer that made this even harder. Anne had seen this before. She was close to Princess Diana. She watched how Diana's position was slowly broken down. The removal of HRH, the isolation, the loss of support. She saw a woman give everything to the monarchy and then get pushed aside. Now she was watching pressure build again, different person, same pattern. She was not going to stay quiet this time. Then she went further. She told Charles that if Camilla didn't stop, she would act, not privately, publicly. She would oversee a full audit of the Queen's household, not just basic numbers. Everything, expenses, staffing, allocations, tied to Queen Camilla herself. That threat landed hard because Anne is the one person in the family who could make it real and be believed. She has a long record of discipline and financial control. If she says she'll expose something, people listen. And she didn't stop there. She brought up Edward's children. There had been quiet pressure to push James, Earl of Wessex, and Lady Louise Windsor into full private status earlier than planned, meaning they would step away from their protected royal position and lose the security and support that comes with it. Anne stopped it immediately. She made it clear that this decision belongs to their parents and to the children themselves, not to Queen Camilla. And this mattered to her for a reason. Anne chose a private life for her own children, Peter and Zara, years ago, but that was her choice. No one forced it. What she was seeing now was different. This was pressure, and she was not going to allow it. By the time the meeting ended, the situation had changed completely. Charles was left sitting with two options, both of them bad. He could back Camilla and risk breaking the credibility of his own authority, or he could step back and accept that some lines cannot be crossed. There was no clean way out, and as Anne walked out of that room, one thing was clear. This was no longer just Edward's fight. It had become a direct challenge to the king himself. After reviewing a full dossier, King Charles III's own legal team delivered their conclusion. The position of Prince Edward was virtually unbreakable. Every piece held. No royal order could override it. Charles had lost that fight. For years, he had operated on a belief that seemed obvious to him. As king, as the one who granted the dukedom in April 2023, he believed he still held control over what came with it. The title, the property, the structure around it. His own lawyers told him in writing that what his mother gave Edward was not temporary. It was a legal inheritance, and it was out of his reach. That alone was enough to shake him, but there was something else in the file that hit harder. The letter witnessed by Philip. Charles knew his mother had always protected Edward and Sophie. He knew where her loyalty sat, but he did not know that Philip, in his final stage of life, had formally backed that protection in writing. That detail changed everything, because it meant this wasn't just Elizabeth's decision, it was both of them. But after all this, the pressure still didn't stop. Queen Camilla did not back down. Her position was specific. She wanted the same rules applied across the royal family. That meant reviewing private gifts like the tiara, tightening control over properties like Bagshot Park, and making sure no one operated outside the system the palace was trying to enforce. She wanted everything brought under central control, and that's where the real issue began. Because Edward and Sophie were already operating outside that structure. They had their own secured home. They had shown they could manage without depending fully on palace control. And that made them difficult to bring in line. So now everything began to look like an effort to pull them back under control by removing the very things that gave them independence. As a result of all this, the situation inside the palace began to break. Staff were choosing sides. People who had worked around Sophie for years began to show quiet support for the Edinburgh household. At the same time, resentment toward the Queen's office began to spread, and where there are sides, there are leaks. Private discussions were no longer fully contained. Documents, notes, internal thinking, all of it sat closer to exposure than it ever had before. The palace, known for its control, was now divided from within. One insider put it simply, the king is being led into a minefield. He is being pushed to choose between his wife's demands and his mother's final decisions. There is no outcome that does not damage the family. That's the position Charles now faces. And outside the palace, the situation is even worse. At a time when the public is dealing with rising costs and financial pressure, the image of a king trying to take a home from his brother, a home that brother paid to restore, would not be received well. It would not be forgiven. According to reports, Charles eventually stepped outside the legal process. He wrote a private note. It was a handwritten message sent directly to Bagshot Park, asking for a family meeting. It was the move of someone who knew the law was not on his side, but the response he received made the situation clear. Edward refused to meet unless his full legal team was present. That changed everything. This was no longer a family conversation. Edward was no longer acting as the younger brother trying to keep peace. He was acting as someone who understood exactly what was at risk and refused to give anything up without protection. And once that line is drawn, it doesn't go back. Charles had spent decades waiting to become king. He now ruled over a monarchy smaller than it had ever been. But inside that smaller structure, something had broken. There was now suspicion, division, and pressure. And somewhere in Surrey, inside a house he could not legally touch, the answer to whether his mother's final decisions would hold was no longer in his control. The palace had to put it in writing. Late on March 25, 2026, a formal note was sent from the office of the Master of the Jewel House to Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh. It was short, direct, no emotion, no explanation. The anthem tiara would remain under her exclusive private control. That was it. No apology for the audit, no acknowledgement of the pressure. At the same time, the review of Bagshot Park was shut down quietly. The official wording described it as recognition of the Edinburgh household's role in maintaining the estate. But inside the palace, no one misunderstood what had just happened. The crown had stepped back. Everything Prince Edward held was confirmed. The title, the home, the tiara, all of it stood exactly where Queen Elizabeth II had placed it. And that confirmation changed the entire balance inside the family, because this was no longer a dispute. It was now a record. That note will sit in the archives long after everyone involved is gone, and when it's read in the future, it will be clear what it means. A claim was made, it failed, and the institution was forced to admit it in writing. But the outcome didn't bring peace. It came with a cost that cannot be repaired. The relationship between King Charles III and Prince Edward has changed completely. It's no longer personal, it's controlled, formal, limited to duty. What the public will see going forward is not the truth. They'll see unity, they'll see appearances, they'll see two brothers standing side by side at events. But inside the family, everyone will know what's real. They'll know that one of them had to use the law to protect himself from the other. That doesn't go away. And the structure of the monarchy has shifted because of it. There are now two clear centers of power. At Buckingham Palace, Queen Camilla and Charles continue to push their vision of a controlled, streamlined monarchy. Away from that center, another group has formed, Princess Anne, Prince Edward, and Sophie, supported quietly by Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales. They're not operating loudly, but they're holding a line, protecting what was built before, refusing to let it be rewritten, and that divide is now fixed. For James, Earl of Wessex, and Lady Louise Windsor, this moment will not be forgotten. They watched their father fight without public drama. He did it through documents, through preparation, through control, and he forced the system to back down. One day, James will carry the Dukedom of Edinburgh, the same title his grandfather held for over 70 years. But he'll carry it with a different understanding. He'll know that the institution that gives can also try to take back. That knowledge changes everything. It doesn't create loyalty, it creates caution. And that will shape how he stands inside that system for the rest of his life. As for Charles, he has his monarchy, he has his structure, he has his authority, but what he doesn't have anymore is the full trust of the brother who stood quietly for decades, paid his own way, and asked for nothing except to keep what was given to him. That loss doesn't show on paper, but it will show over time, and long after the documents are filed and the silence settles, that is the part that will remain.